Ancient cities hold a secret mathematical code in their very streets. We often picture early civilizations as primitive, yet their urban layouts reveal a startling grasp of geometry and astronomy. These were not random collections of buildings, but precisely planned metropolises that have stood for thousands of years. You will learn how ancient planners used math to design cities so advanced they challenge our own modern engineering. How did they align entire avenues with distant stars without any digital tools? What hidden numerical patterns are buried in the stones of forgotten empires? By the end, you will see the blueprint for building cities that are not only functional but deeply harmonious with the cosmos. What does it truly mean to design a city that can last for millennia? The blueprint for an eternal city began not with stone, but with a single line drawn in the earth. Before any grand monuments or sprawling plazas, ancient surveyors used the most fundamental tools to impose mathematical order onto the natural landscape. Their entire process was built upon a profound connection between the cosmos and the ground beneath their feet. They saw the universe as a system of perfect geometric forms, and they believed their cities should be a reflection of that celestial order. This was not merely an artistic choice, it was a functional one. The circle, the square, and the triangle became the essential vocabulary of urban design. A circle could define a sacred boundary or a central plaza where the community gathered. A square provided the most efficient and stable grid for housing and markets. And the triangle, especially the right-angled triangle, was the secret key to precision. To achieve this, their toolkit was deceptively simple. One of the most vital instruments was the gnomon, a straight pole placed upright in the ground. By patiently tracking the path of its shadow throughout the day, a planner could pinpoint true north and south with remarkable accuracy. This established the primary axis of the entire city, aligning its main avenues with the fundamental directions of the earth itself. Once that central line was set, they turned to another humble tool, a length of rope with equally spaced knots. By stretching this rope into a triangle with sides in the ratio of 3, 4, and 5, they could effortlessly create a perfect right angle. This practical application of a principle later known as the Pythagorean theorem was used to lay out perpendicular streets and ensure buildings were squared perfectly. This marriage of simple geometry and astronomy meant that a city's layout was literally written in the stars and measured with rope. A main street could be oriented to catch the first light of the summer solstice, while a temple doorway might align with the rising of a specific star. These foundational acts transformed abstract numerical ratios into a tangible, lived-in environment. The result was a city that felt inherently right, a place where human activity unfolded within a framework that echoed the harmony of the cosmos. This deep-seated desire to build in concert with the universe is a thread we will see woven through civilizations separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. Far from the familiar landscapes of Egypt and Mesopotamia, another ancient people were mastering mathematics on an urban scale. In the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were not just settlements, they were meticulously engineered machines for living. Around 2600 BC, their planners laid out the world's first known grid cities, a testament to a powerful, centralized vision. Walking through these ruins, you would have found wide, straight streets intersecting at perfect right angles, creating neat rectangular blocks that organized the entire city. This was not a haphazard growth. It was a conscious design imposed upon the landscape with mathematical certainty. The evidence for this control is found in the smallest details. Across the entire civilization, from one city to the next, bricks were manufactured to a standard size. This was a system built on shared units of measurement, a common mathematical language that allowed for the replication of complex urban forms over a vast territory. The orientation of the city itself adds another layer of sophistication. The main streets were often aligned precisely with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Achieving this on such a large scale almost certainly required astronomical observation, using the sun and stars to fix the city's primary axes, just as earlier cultures had done with their nomens. But this mathematical precision was not merely for grand spectacle. It served a profoundly practical purpose. That orderly grid was the backbone for one of the ancient world's most advanced water management systems. Carefully engineered drains ran alongside the straight streets, while houses were equipped with baths and wastewater channels that fed into a city-wide network. The mathematical mind that planned the perfect right angle also calculated the precise slopes needed for water to flow, preventing floods and managing waste for tens of thousands of people. Here, mathematics was the invisible architect, creating a harmonious balance between geometric order and the daily needs of a thriving metropolis. This sophisticated application of numbers to solve complex urban problems marks the Indus Valley as a pinnacle of early engineering, a silent blueprint for a civilization that understood the power of a plan. While the Indus Valley used geometry for urban function, the Egyptians elevated it to a divine art. Their cities were more than just administrative centers. They were physical prayers etched into the desert, designed to maintain the balance of the cosmos itself. Nowhere is this more evident than in the short-lived capital of Amarna, built under the radical pharaoh Akhenaten around 1346 BC. This was not a city that simply grew. It was a single, monumental act of creation, a perfect geometric diagram brought to life. The entire urban plan was laid out along a grand north-south axis, a royal road that served as the city's spiritual and physical backbone. This central avenue was not randomly placed. It was meticulously aligned with the path of the sun, honoring Akhenaten's sole deity, the Aten. Every sunrise would have dramatically illuminated this processional way, turning the city itself into a daily celebration of solar power. To achieve such breathtaking precision over distances of miles, Egyptian surveyors relied on an arsenal of simple yet brilliant tools. They used leveled platforms and long sighting rods to establish perfectly straight baselines across the undulating desert terrain. From these primary lines, they employed geometric progressions to subdivide the vast territory into precise zones for palaces, temples, and residential districts. The entire city became a series of proportional relationships, a mathematical harmony made stone. The key to this consistency was the royal cubit, a standardized unit of measurement etched into a piece of black granite. This was not just a ruler, it was a sacred object. Every building, every street width, every temple column was measured in these divine units. The dimensions of a courtyard or the height of a gateway were not arbitrary. They were calculated using ratios believed to be pleasing to the gods. Mathematics was the language through which humanity could communicate with the cosmic order. In Amarna, a wall was not just a wall, it was a statement of stability. A processional avenue was not just a road, it was a channel for celestial energy. This profound integration of math and spirituality meant that urban design was a form of worship, a continuous ritual performed in stone and space to ensure the universe remained in balance. This cosmic conversation between city and sky was perfected by the Maya. Deep within the rainforest, their metropolis of Tikal was not merely built upon the land, it was carefully woven into the fabric of the heavens. The grand pyramids and wide plazas were positioned with such exacting alignment that the entire urban center functioned as a colossal astronomical instrument. A main causeway might point directly to the spot on the horizon where the brilliant planet Venus would first appear after a period of invisibility. Another structure could be oriented to frame the sun precisely at its northernmost point on the summer solstice, casting a dramatic play of light and shadow that marked a pivotal day in the agricultural cycle. To achieve this, Mayan astronomer planners employed a sophisticated system of horizon markers. They used natural features like distant hilltops or constructed tall towers as fixed sightlines. By observing the sun's path against these markers over many years, they could determine true east and west with incredible accuracy, long before the invention of the magnetic compass. The mathematical challenge here was immense. They were not just drawing straight lines on a flat surface. They were calculating precise angles across a curved landscape, accounting for the slow wobble in the Earth's axis that gradually shifts the positions of stars over centuries. This required a deep, practical understanding of spherical geometry and the patience to maintain observational records for generations. The result was a city that pulsed with cosmological meaning. When the ruler stood atop a pyramid on a specific day, and the sun set in perfect alignment with the central avenue, it was a powerful demonstration of their sacred connection to the celestial order. This celestial urbanism provided a practical, stone and mortar calendar for farmers and priests, but its true power was symbolic. It transformed the city from a collection of buildings into a living model of the universe, a place where human authority was legitimized by the eternal movements of the stars. In the highlands of central Mexico, the silent grandeur of Teotihuacan whispers a different kind of mathematical secret. Here, geometry was not merely a tool for order, but a sacred language. The vast Avenue of the Dead, flanked by monumental pyramids, cuts through the city on a grid so precise it feels otherworldly. This was not just urban planning, it was cosmology written in stone. The entire city was deliberately angled 15.5 degrees east of true north. Why such a specific orientation? Modern research reveals this axis points directly to the setting of the Pleiades star cluster on a key date in the Mesoamerican calendar. The builders were weaving celestial events directly into the urban fabric, turning the city itself into a permanent astronomical clock. This celestial alignment was matched by an obsession with harmonious proportions. The dimensions of the massive pyramid of the sun are not random. Its base perimeter is almost exactly equal to the circumference of a circle, with a height equal to the pyramid's own. This subtle incorporation of pi, the fundamental constant of circles, suggests a deep, intuitive grasp of transcendental ratios. Elsewhere, the relationships between plazas and platforms often conform to the golden mean, a ratio of approximately 1 to 1.618, revered for its perfect balance and pervasive presence in nature. The planners likely used a standardized unit of measurement, perhaps based on the average human stride or a fraction of a celestial cycle, to replicate these perfect ratios across the entire 20-square-kilometer metropolis. But the geometry served a dual purpose. The repetitive squares and concentric circles found in the city's layout were not just aesthetic choices, they were symbolic representations of the universe. A series of nested plazas might map the layered realms of the underworld, while a perfect right triangle formed by 3 key temples could chart the sun's path from dawn to dusk. Walking from the Pyramid of the Moon down the Avenue of the Dead toward the distant Pyramid of the Sun was not just a physical journey, it was a spiritual pilgrimage through a cosmic diagram. Mathematics provided the framework for a profound mythological experience, guiding the soul as much as it directed the feet. This seamless fusion of number and narrative created an environment where every stone was imbued with meaning, a city designed to be both a home for the living and a map to the divine. The Greek city-state elevated urban design into a philosophical statement. For thinkers like Pythagoras, the universe itself was built upon numbers, and this belief flowed directly into the planning of their cities. They sought to create an environment that embodied the ideals of balance, reason, and democratic order, transforming abstract mathematical concepts into the very streets where people lived. At the forefront of this movement was Hippodamus of Miletus, a figure so influential that his name became synonymous with a new way of building. His Hippodamian plan replaced the tangled, organic growth of older settlements with a rational grid of straight, intersecting streets. This was not just about creating neat rectangles, it was about imposing a logical framework for human society. The grid divided the city into specialized zones, a central space for public discourse, distinct areas for residential life, and dedicated land for artisans. This was mathematics applied to social organization, creating a modular blueprint for a functioning community. The geometry was precise and purposeful. Planners used modular measurements where the width of a street was in a specific ratio to the size of a city block. This created a consistent visual rhythm and a sense of harmonious proportion that was pleasing to the eye. A wide main avenue leading to the public square, or agora, was not just a traffic route, it was a calculated feature designed to draw people together. The agora itself was often a perfect rectangle, strategically positioned at the city's heart and framed by colonnades and public buildings. Its dimensions were frequently based on the same principles of symmetry and balance that Greek sculptors used to create their timeless statues. This was beauty with a function, where the precise placement of a temple or a stoa fostered chance encounters and civic engagement. Why did this mathematical order feel so right? The Greeks believed that certain ratios, like the golden mean, were inherently harmonious because they echoed patterns found in nature, from the spiral of a seashell to the arrangement of leaves on a stem. By embedding these ratios into their cities, they were aligning human civilization with a deeper cosmic order. A residential block built to these proportions was not merely efficient, it was a miniature representation of a rational universe. This mathematical framework also served a vital practical need: defense. The uniform grid allowed for the rapid and organized movement of soldiers to any point along the straight, wide streets, turning the entire city into a defensible fortress. From the democratic discussions in the geometrically perfect agora to the strategic advantages of the rectilinear grid, Greek urban planning demonstrated that mathematics was the ultimate tool for building a society that was both beautiful and resilient. This powerful synthesis of number and civic life would become a blueprint for the world to come. The straight lines of a city's streets were only the beginning of its mathematical blueprint. Beneath the surface, a more vital calculation was taking place, one that determined the very survival of the metropolis. The management of water demanded a mastery of numbers that pushed ancient engineers to their creative limits. In Rome, the aqueducts stand as a breathtaking testament to this precision. To move water across dozens of miles, engineers calculated gradients so slight they were almost imperceptible, sometimes a drop of only 1 foot for every 100 feet of length. This gentle, constant slope was the key to a steady, powerful flow, and it was achieved with an instrument called the chorobates. This long, leveled trough filled with water allowed surveyors to establish a true horizontal reference across vast, uneven landscapes, proving that the mathematics of flow was as important as the strength of the stone arches themselves. This same mathematical foresight was applied to public health millennia earlier in the Indus Valley. Their elaborate networks of drains and wells were not randomly placed. They were positioned using geometric surveys to ensure wastewater flowed away from residential areas and fresh water remained accessible. The careful slopes of these brick-lined channels, calculated to prevent blockages and stagnation, show a society using geometry as a tool for collective well-being, addressing the health challenges of dense urban living with brilliant practical math. Meanwhile, in the Maya world, the challenge was not transporting water over distance but capturing it in time. Their cities were designed to harness the seasonal rains with exacting volumetric calculations. Vast reservoirs were engineered with specific capacities, and a network of canals distributed this life-giving resource based on a system of standardized units. This allowed for the fair and efficient allocation of water to different districts, turning mathematical theory into a tool for social equity and resilience during dry periods. From the gentle slope of a Roman aqueduct to the calculated volume of a Mayan reservoir, these structures reveal an ancient understanding of principles we now call geometry and even early calculus. They were solving complex problems of flow, volume, and distribution, proving that the deepest mathematics in an ancient city were not always in its grand plazas, but in the essential, life-sustaining currents that flowed beneath them. Across the world in ancient China, the design of a capital city was a sacred act of cosmic creation. The metropolis of Chang'an was not merely built for people, it was constructed as a perfect earthly mirror of the celestial order, its every dimension dictated by a profound numerical symbolism. This blueprint for harmony was drawn from ancient texts like the Zhu Lai, which provided precise mathematical instructions for laying out an imperial capital. The ideal form was a perfect square or rectangle, its walls and gates meticulously aligned with the four cardinal directions. This was not just for orientation, it was a geometric statement of stability and balance, a bulwark against the chaos of the world. To achieve this, planners employed the Lai, a standardized unit of measurement, and used complex geometric calculations to position the city's features in accordance with astrological events and the principles of Feng Shui, the flow of energy through the landscape. The entire city was then subdivided into a modular grid of wards, like a vast, orderly chessboard. Each ward was a self-contained neighborhood, its size and proportions calculated using sacred ratios that reinforced the city's symbolic structure. At the absolute center of this geometric perfection lay the Imperial Palace, the axis mundi connecting the human realm to the heavens. This central positioning was a mathematical expression of the emperor's role as the son of heaven, the pivotal link between the cosmic and the earthly. But the numbers themselves held the deepest meaning. The number 9, considered the ultimate Yong number representing heaven, was woven throughout the design. You would find it in the symbolic count of city gates or the dimensions of the most important ceremonial spaces. The number 12, representing the earthly branches and the cycles of time, might dictate the number of major avenues or administrative divisions. Every measurement, every count, was a deliberate choice to embed the universe's fundamental patterns into the very streets and walls. This fusion of mathematical precision and spiritual belief created an urban environment that was both a highly efficient machine for governance and a continuous ritual. Walking through the orderly wards of Chang'an, a citizen was constantly surrounded by a physical manifestation of harmony, a daily reminder of their place within a larger, divinely ordered cosmos. The city's layout was a powerful tool for reinforcing social order, proving that the most enduring urban plans are those that speak not just to our need for shelter, but to our longing for meaning. A single cubit was more than a unit of length, it was a shared language of construction. Across the empires of Mesopotamia, from the foundations of Ur to the walls of Babylon, the royal cubit provided a consistent scale. This meant that a master builder dispatched from one city to another did not need to reinterpret the blueprints. The mathematical proportions for a ziggurate's towering tiers, the precise width of a city gate, these could be faithfully reproduced anywhere within the kingdom. The system's brilliance lay in its adaptability. While the core unit remained, slight regional variations were often officially sanctioned, calibrated to the local ruler's own forearm, making the measurement both universal and deeply personal. This mathematical consistency was the glue that held vast, diverse territories together, enabling a cultural and architectural unity that spanned generations. Across the sea, the Roman legionary carried this same principle in his toolkit. As his cohort marched into new lands, the first act of conquest was often an act of mathematical order. Using the pes, the Roman foot, and the longa actis, soldiers would lay out the template for a new castrum, a military camp. Every road, every barracks block, every commander's tent was positioned according to a strict, repeatable formula. This was urban design as a military standard, a predictable and defensible layout that could be established in a matter of days, from the damp forests of Britannia to the sun-baked hills of Judea. The origin of these units was profoundly human. The cubit came from the length of the forearm from elbow to fingertip. The digit was the width of a finger. These were measures anyone could understand and replicate. Yet over time, these organic standards were refined through mathematical calibration. A master cubit rod, often made of granite or bronze, became the official reference, stored in a temple to protect it from the elements and ensure its permanence. This transition from the body to the calibrated artifact was a quiet revolution in precision. It meant that a construction project begun by a grandfather could be completed by his grandson without a single deviation in the master plan. This persistence of measurement systems did more than just build sturdy walls, it facilitated everything. A merchant from one city knew exactly how much cloth a cubit would buy in another. A tax collector could calculate grain shipments from a dozen different provinces using the same volumetric units. The very idea of an empire, of a shared identity across thousands of miles, was made possible by this invisible mathematical framework. Standardization was the ultimate innovation, the silent engine that allowed a grand urban vision to be scaled across a continent and to endure long after its planners were gone. High in the Andes, the Incas transformed mathematics into a language of stone and sky. For them, the jagged peaks were not obstacles, but sacred partners in a grand design. Their cities, like the legendary Cusco, were planned with a breathtaking synthesis of geometry, astronomy, and geography, creating urban centers that felt like a natural extension of the Earth itself. Cusco itself was laid out in the shape of a giant puma, a powerful spiritual symbol. The prow of this stone cat was the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, its massive zigzagging walls forming the creature's teeth, while the confluence of two rivers outlined its tail. This was not a vague artistic impression. It required precise geometric planning to map the symbolic animal's form onto the complex mountainous terrain, using carefully measured sightlines and calculated distances to turn an abstract concept into a city you could walk through. Every street and building was then oriented with celestial precision. The Incas tracked the sun's passage with incredible accuracy, aligning structures to the solar zenith, those 2 days of the year when the sun sits directly overhead and casts no shadow. They used carved stone pillars known as Teotihuacan, which translates to hitching post of the sun. These were not just ritual objects, they were sophisticated astronomical markers and surveying tools. By observing the shadows they cast at different times, planners could determine solstices, equinoxes, and the optimal dates for planting and harvest, embedding the agricultural calendar directly into the city's stonework. To manage these complex projects across such difficult topography, the Incas relied on a base 10 numerical system, and an ingenious recording device, the quipu. These collections of knotted cords were far more than simple counting tools. They were a complex data storage system. Different knot types, positions, and cord colors could record measurements for terraces, calculate the volume of stone needed for a building, or plan the gradient for a canal stretching for miles. This mathematical data allowed them to design with a foresight that seems almost impossible. At Machu Picchu, we see the ultimate expression of this philosophy. Steep slopes were transformed into hundreds of perfectly leveled agricultural terraces, their retaining walls engineered with such geometric stability they have withstood centuries of earthquakes and torrential rain. A sophisticated network of canals and fountains distributed water throughout the city, each channel calculated for perfect flow and volume. The entire urban sector, from the royal residences to the Temple of the Sun, was positioned in a harmonious relationship with the surrounding apus, the mountain spirits. Here, mathematics was the invisible thread that wove the urban fabric into the sacred landscape. The result was a city that was profoundly functional, spiritually resonant, and astonishingly durable. The Incas demonstrate that the highest purpose of mathematics in urban design was not to conquer nature, but to converse with it, creating a built environment that was truly alive. These precise geometric plans did more than organize space, they organized society itself. A city's mathematical grid often served as a physical diagram of the social order, making hierarchies visible and permanent. The very act of dividing land into zones was a powerful form of social engineering, using numbers to dictate who lived where and how they interacted. In the heart of a Mesopotamian city like the towering ziggurat was not just a central landmark, it was the calculated center of the universe. This sacred and administrative core was positioned with absolute precision along the city's primary cosmic axis, a geometric proof of the ruler's divine connection. Radiating out from this powerful nucleus, the residential quarters for artisans, merchants, and laborers were laid out in a modular grid of standard-sized plots. This repetitive patterning was not merely efficient, it was a tool for control. These uniform blocks made tax assessment straightforward and population monitoring simple, embedding administrative logic into the city's very foundations. The mathematics of status extended into the streets themselves. The width of a major processional way leading to the temple was calculated to be grand and imposing, a ratio of perhaps 5:1 compared to a narrow alleyway in a commoner's district. The size of a city block in an elite neighborhood might be a perfect square, while those in outer areas were smaller rectangles. These were not arbitrary decisions. Planners used proportional systems to allocate space according to social rank, ensuring that a person's importance was reflected in the geometry of their surroundings. Walking from the spacious, ceremonially aligned plaza near the palace into the tight, efficient grid of a craftsman's ward was a daily lesson in one's place in the world. This mathematical zoning created a powerful symbolism. The city became a microcosm of the cosmos, with the ruler's domain at the center, mirroring the god's order, and the concentric rings of decreasing grandeur representing the layered structure of reality. In this way, mathematics transcended its practical role. It became the language of power, a silent but constant reinforcement of a social contract written not on paper, but in the dimensions of streets and the size of house plots. The urban plan was a script, and every citizen, simply by moving through their daily life, was performing a role assigned to them by number and line. Roman urbanism turned mathematics into an instrument of empire. With a standardized grid, they could imprint their identity onto any landscape, from the deserts of North Africa to the misty hills of Britain. The entire process began with a sacred ritual of surveying known as the limitatio, where the city's founding axes were ceremonially drawn. The Decumanus Maximus, the primary east-west street, and the Cardo Maximus, the main north-south artery, were not just roads. They were the city's mathematical backbone, intersecting at a perfect right angle to form the very center of the new community. This cross-shaped division of space was more than a practical layout. It was a symbolic reclaiming of territory, a geometric declaration of Roman order imposed upon perceived chaos. To achieve this precision across thousands of sites, Roman military engineers relied on two brilliant tools: the groma, a simple but effective instrument with weighted plumb lines, allowed them to sight perfectly straight lines over great distances, laying out the relentless grid with unwavering accuracy. Meanwhile, the libra, or water level, ensured that aqueducts and roads maintained the gentle, consistent gradients vital for the flow of water and the ease of troop movement. Once this primary cross was established, the land was subdivided into a chessboard of square or rectangular plots called insulae. These were not random shapes. Their uniform dimensions were calculated for maximum efficiency in land distribution, taxation, and construction. Public buildings were then placed with strategic intent at mathematically determined nodes within this grid. The forum, the bustling heart of civic life, was almost always positioned at the intersection of the Decumanus and the Cardo, guaranteeing its central accessibility. The dimensions of these public spaces were governed by harmonious ratios that blended beauty with function. A basilica, serving as a courthouse and marketplace, often followed a 2-to-1 length-to-width ratio. This proportion created a sense of grandeur and balance while also facilitating the orderly movement of crowds. Theaters and baths were similarly situated according to geometric principles that optimized acoustics, sight lines, and the circulation of people. This mathematical replaceability was the genius of the Roman system. A soldier stationed on the German frontier would find the same familiar urban layout, the same proportional forums, and the same predictable street names as a merchant in Roman Spain. This created a powerful, unifying sense of Roman identity, a shared civic experience that helped bind a vast and diverse empire together. The Roman grid was more than a collection of streets. It was a scalable formula for civilization itself, proving that mathematics could be the ultimate tool for building not just cities, but an entire world. Yet the geometric perfection of Roman streets rested upon a deeper, invisible foundation. Long before an empire could rise, the minds of Greek philosophers were charting the abstract laws of the universe, providing a theoretical toolkit that would shape cities for centuries. Pythagoras and his followers saw numbers not just as tools for counting, but as the very essence of reality. They believed that specific numerical ratios held a sacred power, echoing the perfect harmony of the cosmos. This philosophy, known as Pythagorean numerology, transformed the work of urban planners. When they designed a temple, its length and width might be set in a precise ratio of 1 to the square root of 2. This proportion creates a rectangle that is inherently stable and visually pleasing, a shape that feels balanced at a glance. The same principle was applied to the grand layout of a city's main plaza or the spacing between major public buildings. These were not arbitrary measurements. They were deliberate choices to imbue the built environment with a sense of cosmic order, making the city itself a testament to a rational and beautiful universe. This theoretical framework was given practical power by Euclid, whose book, The Elements, systematized geometry into a set of clear axioms and logical proofs. For the first time, planners had a reliable, step-by-step method for solving complex spatial problems. Imagine a city architect in ancient Alexandria, tasked with dividing a vast, uneven tract of land into thousands of equal plots for new settlers. Using Euclid's theorems, he could calculate areas with precision, ensuring every family received a fair and accurately measured parcel of land. This same geometric rigor allowed engineers to design amphitheaters where every seat had a clear sight line to the stage by calculating the precise angles of the rising tiers. The principles of Euclid enabled the accurate alignment of an entire street grid to capture the sun's path on the summer solstice, turning a daily celestial event into a permanent feature of the urban landscape. These mathematical ideas were not confined to dusty scrolls. They formed the core curriculum in schools of architecture and engineering across the Hellenistic world and later in Rome. A graduate of such a school would carry with him the ability to translate abstract ratios and geometric proofs into resilient walls, efficient water systems, and awe-inspiring public spaces. This education transformed urban design from a practical craft into a philosophical pursuit, a way to build a society that reflected the highest ideals of reason and harmony. The enduring legacy of these Greek thinkers is found in the silent, perfect angles of a forgotten city wall, a timeless reminder that the most enduring urban plans are those written in the universal language of mathematics. The Khmer Empire turned myth into metropolis, carving its vision of the cosmos directly into the Cambodian jungle. At Angkor, the city was not built upon the land so much as it was inscribed upon it, a vast, three-dimensional mandala made of stone and water. The urban plan of Angkor Thom is a staggering example of this, a perfect square of city walls and moats deliberately oriented to the four cardinal directions. This geometric perfection was deeply symbolic. The surrounding moat represented the primordial cosmic ocean, while the walls stood for the mountain ranges at the edge of the world. At the very center of this cosmic diagram rose the Bayon Temple, its towers carved with serene, giant faces, a temple mountain acting as the axis mundi connecting the earthly realm to the heavens. This alignment was not merely spiritual theater. The entire city was positioned so that its central structures aligned with the precise positions of the sun during the equinoxes, moments of perfect celestial balance. On these days, the sun would rise and set in dramatic alignment with the city's main gates and central towers, turning the entire urban landscape into a functioning solar calendar. Achieving this on such a monumental scale required a mathematics that was both sacred and practical. The planners used proportional systems based on revered numbers from Hindu and Buddhist texts to dictate every dimension. The spacing between the iconic towers of Angkor Wat, the length of its soaring galleries, the width of its elevated causeways, all were determined by these divine ratios. This created a rhythmic, harmonious architecture where every element felt intrinsically connected to the whole, a physical expression of cosmic order. To transfer this intricate geometry from plan to reality, surveyors employed sophisticated tools. They used long, calibrated measuring cords to lay out the vast grid, and simple water levels to ensure perfect horizontality across miles of terrain. This same mathematical precision was applied to the city's lifeblood, its water. The Khmer engineered massive reservoirs known as barrays and a complex network of canals with calculated slopes and volumes. This hydraulic system was a masterpiece of ecological engineering, designed to capture monsoon rains, store the water, and distribute it for agriculture and daily use throughout the year. Here, mathematics served a triple purpose. It was the language of the gods, the tool of the engineer, and the strategy for survival. The result was a city that thrived for centuries, a spiritual center that was also a marvel of sustainable urban planning. The Khmer did not see a division between the sacred geometry of their temples and the practical geometry of their canals. For them, it was all part of a single, unified vision, a demonstration that the most resilient cities are those built not just for people, but as a conscious reflection of the universe itself. A master plan is nothing without the tools to carve it into the earth. The true genius of ancient precision lies in the hands-on instruments that turned celestial mathematics into tangible streets and walls. The Greek dioptra was a marvel of its age, a complex sighting tube mounted on a tripod that could measure both horizontal and vertical angles with stunning accuracy. This was the ancient world's equivalent of a modern theodolite. An engineer using a dioptra could stand on a hilltop, sight a distant peak, and calculate the exact grade needed for an aqueduct to descend at a perfect, gentle slope across miles of rolling countryside. It was this tool that made those seemingly impossible straight lines and consistent flows a reality. Meanwhile, the Roman groma provided the foundational geometry for their empire-wide grids. This deceptively simple device featured a cross of 4 arms, each hanging a plumb line. By sighting along these weighted cords, a surveyor could establish a flawless right angle, the essential building block for every rectangular city block and every intersection of the Cardo and Decumanus. With just a groma and a team of markers, a small crew could lay out the entire street plan for a new city in a matter of days. Across the ocean, Mesoamerican planners achieved similar feats with different tools. They used sighting alidades, straight-edged rulers with sighting notches, to pinpoint the risings and settings of stars against fixed horizon markers. A simple pair of aligned posts could define an axis that pointed directly to the sun's position on the solstice. For measuring on the ground, they used knotted ropes, stretching them to create standard units and even forming them into triangles to generate perfect geometric shapes for temple platforms and plazas. This practical knowledge was not written in formal textbooks but was preserved through generations of master-apprentice relationships. A young surveyor would learn the rules of thumb, the mathematical tables for celestial events, and the precise feel of the tools in his hands. This ensured that the sacred ratios and alignments were replicated with unwavering consistency, century after century. The proof is in the silent, empty fields that once held great cities. Modern laser surveys show that the deviations in a street grid laid out 2,000 years ago are often less than a few centimeters over a kilometer. That is a level of accuracy that speaks to a profound partnership between human ingenuity and mathematical truth, a partnership that built the world we have inherited. A base 20 numerical system pulsed through the heart of every Maya city. This was not merely a way to count, but a way to see the world, a framework that transformed abstract time into tangible stone. Their invention of zero was a revolutionary leap, a concept of nothingness that gave form to everything, allowing for calculations of breathtaking scope. With this system, they tracked celestial cycles across vast stretches of time, and these very cycles became the blueprint for their urban spaces. At Capon, the entire city layout can be read as a physical expression of their calendar. The positions of stelae, the alignments of ball courts, and the stepped levels of acropolises often correspond to key intervals in their long count, a calendar measuring millions of days. A plaza's length might encode a specific number of solar years, while the distance between 2 temples could represent a complete cycle of Venus. Their planners likely used a standardized unit of measurement, perhaps the hanab, to ensure these proportional relationships were maintained with ritual exactness across the entire city. This created a harmony of scale, where the dimensions of a doorway in a palace resonated with the proportions of a distant pyramid, all speaking the same mathematical language. This numerical code also dictated the social order. Elite residences and major temples were not placed at random. They occupied mathematically significant points, often at the intersection of processional ways that were themselves aligned with celestial events. A causeway might point to the exact spot where the sun sets on the equinox, and where it met another avenue aligned with the rising of the Pleiades, a royal compound would be established. This was hierarchical zoning by cosmic right, positioning the ruling class at the literal crossroads of celestial power. The geometry of their sacred spaces reveals an even deeper layer of mathematical intuition. The careful proportions of a corbelled arch or the precise curvature of a tower often embed constants like pi or the golden ratio, phi. These were not likely calculated through formal equations, but discovered through generations of practical geometry and a profound sense of aesthetic balance that echoed the patterns they observed in nature. The result was a city that functioned as a cosmic clock. The movement of shadows across a pyramid steps marked the hours. The alignment of a doorway with a specific star heralded a coming season, and the very arrangement of buildings guided the community through an eternal celestial dance. The Maya did not just build in time, they built with time, using their advanced mathematics to weave the threads of human life into the enduring tapestry of the heavens. Numbers themselves could tell a story of creation. In the ancient world, the rigid lines of a city's grid and the precise dimensions of its temples were often a physical recitation of sacred myths, a way to make the stories of the gods permanently visible in the landscape. This was mathematics as a narrative art. The Hindu tradition codified this idea into the Vastu Purusha mandala, a square geometric grid that served as the divine blueprint for both temples and entire cities. This grid was not an empty diagram. It was a map of the cosmic being Purusha, with each smaller square within the larger one allocated to a specific deity. To design a city using this mandala was a profound mathematical act. The planner had to divide the land with absolute precision, ensuring that the square for the god of fire was in the correct southeast position, while the square for the god of water was perfectly placed in the northwest. A single miscalculation in this geometric division was believed to disrupt the flow of cosmic energy and divine favor. The city became a living body, its streets and districts corresponding to the limbs of a celestial giant, its mathematical harmony ensuring spiritual and worldly prosperity. This same principle of symbolic numbers shaped the skylines of Mesopotamia. The Great Ziggurat was far more than a temple. Its towering, stepped form was a calculated representation of a staircase to heaven, a cosmic mountain connecting the human world with the divine. The number of its levels was never arbitrary. It was a sacred number, often 7, representing the known planets or the layered realms of the universe. The dimensions of each tier were calculated using the same mathematical systems used for administration and trade, but here, those numbers were imbued with theological meaning. The height of the first level might correspond to the domain of one god, while the next level represented a higher, more powerful deity. The entire structure was a mathematical model of the celestial hierarchy, a climbable prayer made of brick and bitumen. This fusion extended to the city gates and main thoroughfares. A city might be designed with 12 gates, not for practical defense alone, but to mirror the 12 months of the year or the 12 great gods in the pantheon. Walking through one gate was an act of aligning oneself with a specific celestial power, while a procession down a central avenue of 7 streets recalled the journey of the sun through the 7 days of the week. These numerical sequences, drawn directly from creation epics and ancestral lore, transformed the urban environment into a walkable archive. Every measurement held a memory, every right angle captured a piece of mythology. The planners were not just engineers, they were storytellers, using geometry as their language to write a city that was both a home for the living and a permanent monument to the stories that defined a people. High upon a vast, artificially constructed terrace, the ceremonial capital of Persepolis proclaimed a new kind of power, one built with geometry and grand synthesis. The Achaemenid Persians did not merely conquer an empire, they designed a cohesive identity for it, and their urban planning was the primary tool. To create the perfectly level platform for this ambitious city, engineers carved into a mountainside and filled a valley, achieving a uniform foundation of such precision that it still astonishes surveyors today. Upon this geometric canvas, the city unfolded with deliberate symmetry. Grand stairways ascended to monumental gateways, all arranged along a central axis that guided visitors through a carefully choreographed experience of imperial might. This axiality was not accidental. It was a mathematical expression of hierarchy, directing the gaze and the footsteps inevitably toward the audience hall of the king. Here, the ruler sat at the focal point of this geometric plan, the human embodiment of the empire's centralizing order. To ensure this architectural harmony could be replicated from Egypt to India, Persian planners almost certainly adopted a standardized unit of measurement, very likely a version of the royal cubit. This shared mathematical language meant that the precise spacing between the towering columns of a palace, the dimensions of a royal apartment, or the proportions of a ceremonial gateway could be communicated across thousands of miles and constructed with interchangeable parts. This was modular design on an imperial scale, enabling a consistent aesthetic and rapid construction that unified diverse territories under a single architectural banner. The city itself was then divided into distinct functional zones using geometric principles. A vast administrative complex with its meticulously planned archives stood separate from the residential quarters and the sacred ceremonial spaces. This zoning was a practical application of geometric division, creating an efficient machine for governance, but it was also deeply symbolic. The entire urban layout reflected the king's role as a unifier of many peoples, with each geometrically defined space contributing to a harmonious whole, just as the empire integrated dozens of cultures into a single, powerful entity. Walking through Persepolis was to move through a manifesto written in stone and space, a declaration that true power lay not just in military strength, but in the mathematical and organizational genius to build a lasting, multicultural world. Scaling a perfect geometric diagram from a parchment to a sprawling metropolis presented a formidable mathematical puzzle. How do you maintain flawless right angles and sacred ratios across miles of uneven, unpredictable terrain? The city of Timgad in Roman Algeria stands as a textbook example of this challenge met with brilliant ingenuity. Founded as a veterans' colony, its initial grid was a perfect square laid out on a flat plain. But as the city grew, its planners had to extend that rigid geometry over nearby hills and valleys. They could not simply redraw the lines. Instead, they used a method called triangulation, creating a network of large, measured triangles across the landscape. This allowed them to project the original grid over the new terrain, adjusting the size of city blocks proportionally to fit the slopes while preserving the essential right-angled relationships of the streets. The city's geometric soul remained intact, even as its physical form adapted to the Earth's contours. This principle of modular design was key to managing such expansion. From the Indus Valley to the Roman world, planners relied on repeatable units. Think of it like building with identical Lego bricks. A standard city block could be defined as 10 units by 10 units. To make a larger district, you simply added more blocks. To create a smaller, more intimate neighborhood, you subdivided the module into halves or quarters. This modular system allowed a city like Mohenjo-Daro to grow incrementally over centuries, with new neighborhoods seamlessly integrating into the older grid because everyone was using the same mathematical vocabulary. This consistency was made possible by the rise of formal training. Written texts on geometry and codas of professionally taught surveyors transformed urban planning from a localized craft into a reproducible science. A graduate from a school in Alexandria could travel to a new frontier and apply the same theorems and tools to lay out a city, ensuring that the imperial blueprint was followed from Britain to Syria. Yet, for all their skill, these ancient engineers were not infallible. Over distances of several miles, tiny, imperceptible errors in alignment with a groma or a slight miscalculation in slope could accumulate. The result was a barely noticeable bend in a long aqueduct or a main avenue that drifted a few degrees off its celestial target. These slight imperfections are not failures. To archaeologists, they are precious clues. They reveal the very human process behind these monumental achievements, showing us the practical limits of their tools and the immense effort required to impose mathematical order on a vast, uncooperative world. Ultimately, the greatest testament to their genius is not perfection, but adaptability, proving that the most enduring urban plans are those that can calculate and recalculate their way through the challenges of growth. These geometric patterns were a sacred language spoken in the angles of every wall. In Mesopotamia, the city was a living diagram of the universe, its streets and temples calculated to reflect a divine blueprint. The processional way leading to Babylon's Ishtar Gate was a masterpiece of this intentional design. This was not merely a road, but a straight, mathematically defined axis flanked by walls adorned with hundreds of repeating animals set against a backdrop of geometric shapes. The precise repetition of triangles and circles was not random decoration. It created a visual rhythm, a cadence measured out in glazed bricks that guided ceremonial parades with a hypnotic, mathematical certainty, transforming a physical journey into a spiritual passage. At the heart of this cosmic order stood the ziggurat, a staggering feat of sacred engineering. The great ziggurat of Ur rose as a stepped pyramid, its sides aligned to the cardinal directions and its angles calculated with unwavering precision. Each tier represented a stage closer to the heavens, a cosmic mountain bridging the human and divine realms. Building this required more than faith, it demanded advanced arithmetic. Engineers had to compute the immense volume of sun-dried bricks needed, calculate the gentle incline of the stairways so they could be climbed in ritual procession, and ensure the entire structure remained stable through scorching summers and seasonal rains. This was mathematics in service of the sublime. This symbolic geometry extended to the entire city plan. Temple complexes often incorporated circular layouts or radial patterns, physical representations of the dome of heaven arching over the earth. The city itself, frequently organized around the four cardinal directions, echoed the Mesopotamian belief in a universe divided into four quarters. To lay out this grand design, surveyors used simple tools like measured ropes and sighting poles, yet their work achieved a level of exactness that made the abstract tangible. A city gate was not just an entrance, it was a portal aligned with a celestial event. A temple's foundation was not just a base, it was a prayer set in stone. Every right angle and every calculated proportion was a deliberate act to harmonize the human community with the cosmos. The urban space became a medium for spiritual expression, a constant, silent reminder that the order of the gods could be found in the mathematics of their city. A single mathematical idea could travel thousands of miles, passed from one civilization to the next like a precious blueprint. The concept of the grid plan is a perfect example of this slow-burning intellectual fire. First seen in the meticulous streets of the Indus Valley, this idea of geometric order was not lost to history. Through trade and contact, it likely traveled westward to Mesopotamia, where it was adopted and adapted, transforming into the organized layouts of emerging cities. From there, the grid journeyed across the Mediterranean, where Greek thinkers like Hippodamus refined it into a philosophical statement for democratic living. Finally, the Romans, masters of practical application, turned it into a scalable formula for empire, stamping their relentless cardo and decumanus across 3 continents. Each culture encountered the same core concept but reinterpreted it through their own unique mathematical lens and societal needs, adding new layers of sophistication. This knowledge did not move on its own. It was carried in the minds of scholars and the toolkits of artisans who traveled along vast networks like the Silk Road. These individuals were the living libraries of their age, sharing methods for celestial alignment or the precise dimensions of a standardized cubit rod. A merchant from Persia might explain the geometric principles of a water channel to a planner in Central Asia, while a captured Egyptian surveyor, employing skills honed along the Nile, could bring his advanced understanding of solar alignment to a new city project for Alexander the Great. This cross-pollination of expertise led to stunning hybrid urban forms. In the Hellenistic cities that blossomed across the Near East after Alexander's conquests, we see a fascinating fusion. The rigorous geometry of Greek street grids was seamlessly integrated with the cosmic symbolism and grand axial plans favored in Eastern traditions. The result was a new urban model, one that balanced mathematical rationality with profound spiritual meaning. This transmission of knowledge was never a simple copy. It was a creative process of adaptation, where universal mathematical principles were filtered through local beliefs and practical challenges. It reveals an ancient world far more interconnected than we often assume, where the precision of a city's layout was rarely an isolated invention, but a collaborative, cumulative achievement written in the common language of number and line. The Nabateans carved their legacy into the very rock of the desert, a testament to mathematical precision in one of the world's most unforgiving landscapes. At Petra, the city's main entrance was not a grand gate, but a winding natural gorge known as the Sick. This was no accident of geography. The narrow canyon served as a celestial corridor, its path deliberately chosen so that on the solstices, the rising or setting sun would fire a beam of light directly down its length to dramatically illuminate the facade of the treasury, the city's most iconic monument. This breathtaking effect was not magic, it was mathematics, requiring planners to calculate the precise angles of the sun's path and align the entire approach with the unwavering logic of astronomy. Beyond this ceremonial entrance, the city unfolded as a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering. In a land where water was more precious than gold, the Nabateans used mathematical surveys to plot a network of channels, dams, and cisterns. They carved water channels along cliff faces with gradients so slight and consistent that every drop of scarce rainfall was captured and directed to vast underground storage facilities. These calculated slopes prevented erosion and ensured a steady flow, enabling the city to support a population of thousands in the heart of the desert. This practical mathematics was mirrored in their sacred architecture. The placement of tombs and temples high on the cliffs often correlates with specific star risings or key phases of the lunar cycle. Each facade positioned in its lofty perch was likely plotted using observational astronomy and geometric principles, integrating the city's calendar of rituals directly into the urban fabric. The Nabateans demonstrate that mathematics was the essential tool for survival and spirituality, a language that allowed them to converse with the stars and command the waters, transforming a barren canyon into a flourishing urban sanctuary. This mathematical journey began with the first permanent settlements, where the very idea of a community was sketched into the earth with fundamental lines and circles. A Neolithic village nestled by a river might arrange its huts in a protective ring, a simple geometric form that defined a social boundary and a shared space. Primary alignment was often with the sun's path, a practical necessity that also embedded a cosmic rhythm into daily life. This was geometry at its most instinctual, using ropes and stakes to create a human-scale order. But as villages swelled into the world's first true cities, the mathematical challenges multiplied. How do you organize thousands of people, manage trade, and distribute resources within a defined space? The answer arrived with the orthogonal grid, a revolutionary concept that marked the dawn of the Bronze Age. This was no longer about a single circle, but about creating an entire city of perfect right angles and parallel streets. Implementing this required a leap in precision. Planners now needed standardized units of measurement and tools capable of projecting straight lines over much greater distances, turning the intuitive patterns of the village into a calculated blueprint for urban life. This was mathematics evolving from a simple tool into a complex language of power and administration. The great leap forward came in the Iron Age, when Greek philosophers transformed the practical knowledge of surveyors into a theoretical science. Thinkers like Pythagoras argued that numbers were the underlying reality of the cosmos, and that a city should be a physical expression of this cosmic harmony. This was not just about building efficient streets, but about constructing an environment that embodied ideals of balance and reason. The grid became a philosophical statement, a geometric framework for democratic society where public spaces and private dwellings coexisted in a calculated balance. This theoretical foundation was then seized upon by the Romans, who became the ultimate practical engineers of the ancient world. Their genius lay in systematization. They established formal schools for surveyors, the agrimensors, who were trained in a unified curriculum of geometry and equipped with standardized tools like the groma. This professional corps could travel to any corner of the empire and lay down the identical urban template, a perfect grid of Cardo and Decumanus with calculated aqueducts and forums. The Romans took the Greek philosophy of harmony and scaled it into a reproducible formula for imperial control, proving that mathematics could be the engine of an empire. This entire progression from the village circle to the imperial grid was made possible by the accumulation of knowledge. Written records, from clay tablets to papyrus scrolls, preserved complex calculations and celestial observations. Specialized professions emerged, dedicated solely to the art of measurement and planning. Each generation did not have to rediscover the principles of the right angle. They could build upon the accumulated wisdom of the past, refining techniques and tackling ever more ambitious projects. The evolution of urban mathematics is a story of civilization itself, a river of knowledge that deepened and widened over centuries, carving the channels in which our modern cities still flow. While the Romans perfected the grid for land armies, another civilization was mastering urban mathematics for the sea. The Carthaginians built their empire on trade, and their cities were precision instruments designed to harness the power of the Mediterranean. In their great capital and its many colonies, like the well-preserved town of Kirkewain, we see a unique fusion of geometric order and maritime necessity. Their street grids were not the rigid, unyielding patterns of a land-based power, but a fluid and adaptable system. The planners would lay out a regular rectangular block system, but then artfully bend and adjust it to follow the natural contours of a coastline or a steep hillside. This was mathematics in dialogue with geography, creating a layout that was both orderly and perfectly suited to its environment. The true genius of Carthaginian planning, however, floated in their harbors. The commercial harbor at Carthage was a stunning feat of geometric engineering, a perfect circle of water surrounded by docks and warehouses. From this central basin, channels led to a protected inner rectangular port for the military fleet. This radial design was not just for show, it was a calculated solution for maximizing berthing space, allowing for the efficient organization of countless trading vessels and enabling rapid deployment of ships for defense. Every curve and line was planned to optimize the flow of commerce and security, turning the city's waterfront into a mathematical engine of economic power. To achieve this consistency from one colony to the next, Carthaginian builders relied on a standardized system of Phoenician measurement, a universal unit of length likely derived from a fraction of a celestial cycle or a common physical standard, meant that a warehouse in a North African outpost and a merchant's home on the coast of Spain could be built to the same proportions. This mathematical uniformity allowed for incredibly efficient use of space in dense urban quarters and facilitated the rapid construction of new trading posts, which was essential for a civilization whose strength was its sprawling network of ports. The city's orientation was also a matter of calculated benefit. Major avenues were frequently aligned to catch the prevailing sea breezes, a natural form of air conditioning driven by simple aerodynamic principles. Other streets might be positioned to align with the sun's path, capturing light and warmth during the winter months. This required planners to use basic astronomical observations to determine the optimal angles, applying practical mathematics to enhance the daily comfort and health of their citizens. This seamless blend of mercantile pragmatism and geometric precision created urban centers that were not only thriving hubs of culture and commerce, but also remarkably resilient. The Carthaginian model demonstrates that in the competitive ancient world, mathematical planning was not a luxury but a critical tool for economic success, enabling a maritime empire to build cities that were as clever and adaptable as the sailors who called them home. The proportions of a building could feel instinctively right because they echoed the geometry of the human form itself. Greek architects discovered that by using the golden ratio, approximately 1 to 1.618, to define the relationship between a temple's length and width, or the height of its columns to the spacing between them, they created a visual harmony that seemed to resonate with a fundamental sense of balance. This was mathematics sculpting emotion in stone. A citizen approaching the Parthenon did not just see a building, they experienced a structure whose every part related to the whole with a serene, mathematical inevitability. This principle extended far beyond single structures. In Roman urban design, the same mathematical care was applied to the experience of moving through space. The Forum of Augustus in Rome was not a random collection of buildings. Its plaza, temples, and colonnades were arranged using precise proportional systems that created a series of carefully framed views. As you walked through the space, your eye was naturally drawn along converging sightlines to a statue of the emperor or the entrance of a temple, a visual journey choreographed by geometry to inspire reverence and awe. This calculated use of perspective made the city itself a dynamic work of art. Far to the east, in ancient Indian cities laid out according to the Vastu Shastra, aesthetic mathematics took the form of rhythmic repetition. Palace facades and temple gateways were adorned with rows of identical decorative elements, their number and spacing determined by sacred numerical sequences. This created a visual cadence, a rhythm in stone that guided the eye and the spirit, transforming a simple walk down a street into a meditative experience. Why does this mathematical beauty still move us today? It is because these planners understood that numbers could evoke feeling. A wide avenue leading to a soaring pyramid creates a sense of grandeur and aspiration. A small, perfectly proportioned courtyard offers intimacy and peace. The ancient city was designed to be felt as much as it was to be navigated, with mathematics serving as the invisible composer of its emotional landscape. This seamless fusion of number and narrative, of calculation and culture, produced environments that nourished the human spirit, proving that the most profound function of urban mathematics was to create not just a place to live, but a place to truly feel alive. A city's lifeblood flowed not through its streets but through the water that filled them. In the ancient kingdoms of Sri Lanka, urban planning was a sacred act of hydraulic engineering. At the heart of metropolis like Anuradhapura, planners designed vast reservoirs known as tanks, colossal artificial lakes that captured the seasonal monsoon rains. These were not simple ponds, they were mathematically precise instruments for survival. Engineers calculated the exact gradients for feeder canals, ensuring water would flow from the main reservoir into a branching network of smaller channels with just the right force. Too steep a slope and the water would rush through, eroding the earthen banks. Too gentle and the flow would stagnate, allowing silt to accumulate and block the vital arteries of the city. This required a deep understanding of volume and flow, a practical geometry that ensured every field in the agricultural hinterland and every district in the urban core received its share of the life-giving resource. To achieve this precision, surveyors employed a standardized unit of measurement called the rhea, a length based on the human arm. This organic scale was then used with remarkable consistency to lay out the entire city. The width of a canal, the dimension of a city block, even the foundation plan for a monastic complex were all defined using this proportional system. The result was a harmonious urban fabric where the needs of daily life and the grandeur of monumental architecture were united by a single mathematical language. This geometry extended to the most sacred structures. The great stupas, hemispherical mounds holding relics, were often positioned at the center of concentric circular terraces. Their massive domes were constructed according to precise ratios derived from Buddhist cosmological diagrams, transforming the entire city into a three-dimensional mandala. A long, straight processional avenue leading to a principal stupa might be deliberately aligned with the rising sun on the day of a major festival, weaving celestial time directly into the urban experience. This seamless fusion of mathematics, ecology, and spirituality created an urban environment of profound resilience. The sophisticated water management system supported intensive agriculture, allowing the population to flourish. The sacred geometry of the layout provided a constant, tangible connection to a higher order, giving meaning to the stone and space. For over 1,000 years, these cities thrived not by conquering their environment, but by designing a mathematical partnership with it. The silent, rain-filled tanks and the geometrically perfect stupas of Sri Lanka stand as a powerful lesson in holistic design, where calculation was used not just to build a city, but to nurture a civilization in lasting harmony with the world around it. Yet even the most brilliant mathematical systems were subject to the real world's imperfections. The tools that granted such precision had their own vulnerabilities. A gust of wind could subtly sway the plumb lines of a Roman groma, introducing a tiny, almost invisible error in a right angle. Over the vast distance of a new city's grid, that minuscule deviation could accumulate, resulting in a main street that slowly, imperceptibly curved away from its intended path. In some Roman colonial towns, modern surveys reveal this exact phenomenon, a gentle skewing of the once perfect grid that speaks not of carelessness, but of the physical limits of their technology. The very ground they built upon could also betray their calculations. An unseen underground spring or a patch of unstable soil might force builders to adjust the foundation of a major temple, throwing off its planned alignment with a celestial event. These were not failures of mathematics, but negotiations with an uncooperative earth. Sometimes the priorities of the culture itself overrode pure geometric logic. A city might be deliberately oriented not toward true north, but toward a distant, sacred mountain considered the dwelling place of a god. This symbolic alignment held a power that transcended astronomical precision, embedding a spiritual landmark directly into the urban experience, even if it made the street plan slightly less efficient. The transmission of knowledge itself presented another challenge. In societies where complex measurement standards were passed down orally from master to apprentice, a single misinterpretation could lead to variations. The royal cubit used in one dynasty might differ slightly from that of its predecessor, causing subtle inconsistencies in building dimensions over centuries. Without the rigorous standardization that written records provide, these small shifts were inevitable. Archaeologists now study these very imperfections with fascination. A bent aqueduct, a slightly off-center plaza, or a neighborhood that breaks from the grid are not flaws to be dismissed. They are precious clues. They reveal the practical problems ancient engineers faced when scaling up a perfect diagram without the aid of advanced calculus or digital modeling software. They show us the human hand at work, adapting, improvising, and sometimes compromising in the face of unforeseen obstacles. Recognizing these limitations does not diminish the awe we feel for their achievements. Instead, it deepens our connection to them. It transforms these ancient planners from mythical figures into brilliant, practical problem solvers, whose greatest skill was often their ability to blend mathematical idealism with the beautiful, imperfect reality of the world they sought to shape. Deep in the humid lowlands of ancient Mexico, the Olmec were encoding their cities with a silent numerical language. At La Venta, the entire ceremonial center unfolds along a precise north-south axis, a monumental decision that anchored the city to the cosmos. The great earthen mounds and open plazas were not randomly scattered. They were positioned using a standardized unit of measurement, a consistent length that may have been derived from the human stride or a fraction of a celestial cycle. This foundational act of measurement transformed the landscape into a geometric diagram, a physical expression of a world you built on balance and proportion. The sheer scale of these constructions, from the massive central pyramid to the sprawling clay pavements, demanded a shared mathematical vocabulary that every builder understood, ensuring that the grand vision remained intact from one generation to the next. This mathematical intent is most powerfully felt in the placement of their most famous artifacts, the colossal stone heads. These immense sculptures, each weighing many tons, were not simply placed where space allowed. They were arranged in deliberate geometric patterns, sometimes in circular groups or linear arrays that required extensive surveying and proportional planning. Moving a single head into its precise position was a feat of engineering, but arranging an entire set according to a hidden geometric code was an act of profound mathematical and social significance. The visual impact of these arrangements was carefully calculated to inspire awe and reinforce a shared identity. How did they manage such precision without a formal written system as we know it? While the Olmec left few deciphered records, artifacts like the so-called ambassador figurine offer a tantalizing clue. This small sculpture is incised with dots and bars, a form of numerical notation that would later be perfected by the Maya. It is not difficult to imagine planners using such a system to count work crews, calculate the volume of earth for a mound, or allocate specific areas of the city to different social groups according to a hierarchical code. Mathematics was the administrative glue that held the urban project together. The Olmec blueprint reveals that the drive to impose mathematical order on urban space is one of humanity's oldest and most enduring impulses, a foundational layer upon which all subsequent Mesoamerican civilizations would build their own celestial cities. The silent stones of these ancient cities tell a story of a universal human quest, across continents and millennia, we see the same patterns emerging, a deep-seated drive to impose mathematical order on the chaos of the world. From the gridded streets of the Indus Valley to the celestial cities of the Maya, these urban designs were far more than random arrangements. They were calculated masterpieces, a profound fusion of science, spirituality, and the social contract. We have walked the processional avenues aligned with solstice suns and traced the perfect right angles laid out with knotted ropes. We have seen how standardized units of measurement and core geometric principles enabled civilizations to build cities that were not only efficient and sustainable but also deeply symbolic. These planners were speaking a universal language, using numbers and lines to express a longing for harmony, a connection to the cosmos, and a blueprint for a well-ordered society. This legacy of mathematical precision did not vanish with its creators. It endures in the very foundations of our modern world. When you walk through a city today with its numbered streets and zoned districts, you are walking in the footsteps of those ancient surveyors. Our ongoing quest to create sustainable, livable urban environments, to balance design with nature, is a direct continuation of their work. Their genius invites us to look at the cities around us with new eyes, to perceive the hidden mathematics in the layout of a park or the flow of traffic. What numerical secrets are embedded in your own hometown? Let this journey be a starting point for your own curiosity. The wonders of our shared past are all around us, waiting to be uncovered in the lines of a map and the stones of a forgotten wall.